10 before the hour. Okay, equality, as in communism and socialism and mongrelizationism, right? You right-wingers know all about equality, don't you, little fruitcakes? And here he mentions one of the iconic events in the struggle for gay rights, too. Equality.
We, the people, declare today that the most evident of truths, that all of us are created equal, is the star that guides us still. Just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls and Selma and Stonewall, just as it guided all those men and women, sung and unsung, who left footprints along this great mall, to hear a preacher say that we cannot walk alone, to hear a king proclaim that our individual freedom is inextricably bound to the freedom of every soul on earth.
Well, it's that last part. The freedom of every soul on earth. Don't forget, Dr. King was assassinated after it became clear to the government of the United States of America that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was not just going to talk about the Negroes being able to sit in the front of the bus anymore. That Dr. Martin Luther King was going to condemn, in the strongest of terms, U.S. militarism. And he did. But that part is never mentioned. When do you ever hear that part of Dr. King's rhetoric and his ideas mentioned? No, it's always about being able to sit downstairs at the movie theater. It's always about being able to ride anywhere on the bus the folks want to ride. It's always about being able to walk into a voting precinct in Mississippi and not being asked to recite the Constitution of the United States before you can vote. Quote, Dr. King, "If America's soul becomes totally poisoned, part of the autopsy must read Vietnam. It can never be saved, the American soul, so long as it destroys the deepest hopes of men the world over," end quote. And Mr. Obama said, to hear King proclaim that our individual freedom is inextricably bound to the freedom of every soul on earth. Sounds a little bit the same, except I think Dr. King was being a Mount Everest more honest about U.S. militarism and intervention and criminal activity. Now, I understand, don't get me wrong, I understand why President Obama can't touch that topic. But I don't understand why people who advocate, and advocate justifiably, for equal protection under the law, why it is never mentioned that Dr. King was not just talking about equal protection under the law for Americans. He was talking about equal justice under the law for everybody on earth. And that the greatest purveyor of terrorism and militarism on earth was his country. And shortly thereafter, he had to be murdered. And he was. Never talk about that, do they? Last one. Now, what does the future hold?
It is now our generation's task to carry on what those pioneers began. For our journey is not complete until our wives, our mothers, and daughters can earn a living equal to their efforts. Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law. For if we are truly created equal, then surely the love we commit to one another must be equal as well. Our journey is not complete until no citizen is forced to wait for hours to exercise the right to vote. Our journey is not complete until we find a better way to welcome the striving, hopeful immigrants who still see America as a land of opportunity. until bright young students and engineers are enlisted in our workforce rather than expelled from our country.
Or placed in our military. You all know what I'm talking about Dr. King. I know you do. He argued for his position of anti-militarism and the poison that his own country was injecting into the planet on April 4th, 1967 at the Riverside Church in New York City. And that was exactly 1 year before he was murdered. And what he was trying to do with that speech was to answer the critics who had said that his anti-war activism was taking away from his civil rights work. It was in that speech that King called the U.S. government the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, as well as the leading exponent of, quote, the deadly Western arrogance that has poisoned the international atmosphere for so long, end quote. Oh, my goodness. All right. Let's get the team out. Time to get rid of this guy. Right? He ain't talking about Negroes in the front of the bus anymore, is he?